Welcome to this video tutorial. Today we're going to talk about application permissions and how you can grant different levels of access to certain users. There are many ways to create a successful authentication process. A lot of it will be contingent on the structure of your organization and also the application's workflow. In this video, we'll cover 4 of the most common use cases. The first use case that we're going to look at in today's video is called public registration and internal permissions. And this use case deals with anybody who comes to our website will have the ability to create an account with a public registration form. And once they create an account, they can log into the application and have the ability to maybe update their profile or do anything else within the application's workflow. And then we also have some kind of an admin or staff member that can log into the application and manage all of the registered members. The example that I like to use most often for this use case is Facebook. If you go to Facebook's homepage, you'll have the ability to create an account and then you can log in to message friends, add new friends, etc. For our second use case today, we're going to look at something called company or department with role permissions. Think of this like having a smaller company or maybe just a single department, and within that department you have users with different roles or different permissions. So you might have an admin level who has the ability to oversee everything in the application. You might have a manager role, someone who only has the ability to edit records, and then you have an employee level access. This user only has the ability to read the data. For our third use case, we're going to look at something slightly more complex that deals with multi-department with role permissions. So think of, let's say, a large organization, and inside this organization or company, we have many departments. We might have sales, marketing, support, and within each department, you have users with different role permissions. So in the sales department, we might have a VP of sales, director of sales, and each user role will have different privileges when they log into the application. And finally, we're going to look at something from a different perspective in terms of more of a SaaS model or software as a service, where we have companies that can register for an account, and once company A logs in, they have the ability to add company A employees. Conversely, if company B registers, company B has the ability to add company B employees. Before I show you how to set up the first use case inside Caspio, let me show you a quick illustration so you have a better understanding what exactly we're going to be setting up in the first part of the video. In this use case, we want to have members or public come to our website and create an account using a registration form, and then once this user registers, we have a staff employee that can log in and manage each one of these members. Now let's go to Caspio and let me show you how to set up the foundation for the first use case. When it comes to setting up the right foundation inside your Caspio account, there are 3 objects that are very critical that you have to know how to set up in order to give those permissions to different users. And the 3 objects are going to be the tables, the views, and authentications. Keep in mind that today's video is under the assumption that you already know how to build DataPages. So throughout the video, we're not going to focus too much on DataPages. Our primary focus in today's tutorial is to learn how to build these foundations. That way you can piggyback on the foundation to build the rest of your DataPages, forms, reports, and whatever else you need for your workflow. So let's go ahead and begin in the tables menu. And as you can see, I already have all of my foundations created. I'm just going to click on Edit to show you the most important fields and also the workflow on how you can accomplish that correct setup. In my first use case, we talked about having these users that can come to our website and be able to register. So for that specific user group, we need to have a table so that we can store all of their information. And I called my table Customers. Now, depending on the nature of your application, you might call this clients, students, depending on who you want to sign up using a registration form on your own website. Let me show you the fields that I have inside this table. And the critical fields that you will need is some kind of a unique ID, You can see that I chose to go with the data type called auto number, but you have other options here. You can do a prefixed auto number, random ID, GUID, or you can just simply select auto number. And I'm calling this customer ID. And what this means that every time somebody signs up on my website, that user or that member will automatically be assigned a unique ID. Then I also have date registered. It's important to know what date and time this member signed up on my website, because as an admin, I would like to be able to see that information and be able to track that. I also have account status, which I'm using a Boolean yes or no checkbox. And the reason why I like to have this field is sometimes I want to make my members or users inactive, and by simply unchecking this box, you're no longer allowing this member to log into the application. So it gives you more control in terms of who can log in and who cannot log into the application. And then you can have all of the other fields that you need for this form, whatever data you want to collect. I have customer name, email, which I also made a unique field because I'm going to use the email as the credential for my members to log into the application. Now you don't have to use email, you can use username, for example. Just make sure that that field is unique. That way you're not repeating the email or the username for every single member. Then we have the password field. That's self-explanatory. We want users to be able to create their password and be able to log in using that credential. And finally, I have the phone number field. You can list all the other attributes that you would like inside this table depending on what information you want to collect from your visitors. You can have gender, address, city, state, zip. Just go down the table and list all the fields that are required that you would like to have in your registration form. Once you're done, you're going to simply click on Save, and that's going to save your table for customers or clients or students depending on who is registering. Now in my table, you can see that I already have two users that I added manually. I have Bob White, and I also have Sarah Smith. Bob is an active member, whereas Sarah at the moment is an inactive member. And you'll see exactly why I left this unchecked in just a couple of minutes. My second table is going to be my staff table. All of the internal employees that can log into the application and manage all the customers. So in my staff table, I only have one user type or one user role because everyone is going to have the same access. In our second use case of this video, I'm going to teach you how you can have different permissions in the staff table, so we have admins, members, employees, etc. But in this case, I only have one user type, and then we have employee ID, as you can see from the prior table. That's an auto number. Every staff employee should have a unique number. We have the name of the employee, the email, which I also made unique, and finally we have the password. And in my staff table, I have a user called John Doe. Now, depending on how many employees you have in your organization, you might want to list all of your staff members inside this table. So far we have two tables, one table that's going to store my customer information and one table that's going to store my staff employee information. A good rule of thumb here is that you don't want to mix these two user groups inside one table, because it's going to be really difficult for you to differentiate who your customers are from your staff or your internal employees. So best database design here is to set up this in two different database tables. The next step is to jump down to views. And the views allow us to filter information from our database tables on what we would like to see from within that table. Now in this example, I'm only having one view that filters active versus inactive customers. Okay, so if you remember in my customer table, I had that checkbox for yes or no, and my view is filtering all active customers. So let me click edit to show you how I configured this. So give your view a name. Then all I did was I included my customer table to the right, and on the next screen I'm using the criteria tab, and then you have the ability here to drag and drop these elements into the canvas screen and create your AND or logical operators. Now in this example, it's a very simple setup, but this can actually get overly complex sometimes depending on how you're filtering data, but I'm only including one field, this field element, and I drag that over here inside this bracket. And all I'm doing here is I'm grabbing my checkbox field called account status, and I want that checkbox to be checked. And if this condition is true, so if account status is checked, this view is now going to filter only my active customers, and you'll see Bob White in this example. Now if I go back to my table of customers, and let's say I open up my table now, and let's just for fun make sure that Sarah is also an active customer. And if this is true, now we should be able to see two active customers inside my view. Okay, so this is how you can control who is going to be viewed inside this view and who's not going to be shown inside the view. Once you're done configuring the views, then the last step is to go down to authentications, and the authentications object is used to create the login interface, which gives you that email and password look and feel. Now in my example, I have two authentications created, one for the customers and one for the staff employees, because we have two different user groups. Now my customer authentication, let's click on edit. I want to build this authentication based on my view, because the view is filtering active employees and I only want to give access to active employees to my application. This is the main reason why I had to create the view to filter active employees. That way I can select my view from here as opposed to my table. Because the table is going to list all of them, but it's not showing me who's active versus who's inactive. So we select the view. How do you want to validate the application? We want to validate this based on the Caspio recommended data source, which is the view itself. Or you can have users log in social media. We have other videos available in our knowledge base that teach you how you can use social media with the login. That way you can give users the ability to log in using Gmail, Twitter, OpenID, depending on what social media services you'd like to use. You can also have a combination of Caspio data source and social media. And lastly, we have single sign-on. So if you have an Active Directory within your organization, you can actually have the users use those same credentials to log into the Caspio application as well. So in my example, I'm going to use recommended, and right away Caspio selects the email and password fields for you inside that login interface. Okay, it's using the email, which is unique, and the password. And we don't need to make any additional changes here. We can click on save, or I can click cancel because I already have this saved. And my staff authentication, really quickly, let's click on edit here as well. My staff authentication is built based on the table because I'm not filtering anything based on admin or manager or employee, which we're going to cover in the next use case of this video. So all I really need is just to link this to my staff table because all of my staff employees are of equal level. No one has higher permission than the other employee within the staff table. And again, when you're done, you simply click on save. And that's our second authentication. Now, if you have built some data pages in the past, which I hope that you have, if you haven't, please watch some of the other videos that we have in our knowledge base. That way you can learn how to build a data page. And once you build your data page, you then have the ability to password protect any data page that you want inside your application. So for example, my registration form, normally it's supposed to be public facing, but what I could do is I can click on edit, and on this screen where you see access and security, I can enable this checkbox, and now I have the ability to either give access to all of my active customers or only my staff employees will have access to that registration form. So if I select my customer authentication and click finish and hit preview, you're now going to see my registration form is password protected. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the next use case where we actually expand upon the staff table and introduce this ability to have admins, managers, and employees. Let me show you how that setup is done in the following use case. Let me show you a quick illustration of our second use case. So again, like before, you have a better understanding what exactly this foundation is going to do for your own application. So in the second use case, we're going to have 3 different user roles. We're going to have an administrator level, and an admin level has the ability to oversee everything in the application. So for example, delete, edit, insert, or do anything else within the app. The second use case, we have a manager role, and managers will have the ability to, let's say, edit and insert new records. And finally, we have an employee level role, and usually an employee level role is the lowest rank. And for our employees, maybe we want to give them access to just read the data without having any editing privileges. So let me show you how we can set this up inside Caspio. Okay, so moving forward, we're going to speed things up a little bit. Hopefully you now have a good understanding after watching the first use case on how we set up these basic foundations, and now hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to understand how by using the tables, views, and authentications, we can separate different user roles and grant privileges to each one of the users. So let's go directly to my table. You're going to be able to see that I have my staff table, and it's slightly a little bit more modified than in our prior use case. Let me click on the design mode. And you will see I still have my employee ID because every employee should have a unique key. I have the names of our employees. We have the email, which is again unique. Password field. And now the only difference is that now I want to be able to have control for status of the employee. So as a manager or as an admin, I would like to be able to make the other employees active or inactive for whatever reason. Maybe the employee has been reprimanded, they've been let go, and I want to have the control of making them inactive. And finally, I have a field called role, and this field is going to be very important. We're going to be using this field to separate our admins from our managers from our employees. And for this field, I have it set to text 255. Now, if I go to my data sheet mode, you're going to be able to see some dummy data in here. I already have 3 user roles set up. John Doe is going to be the admin level with an active status. I have Sally, who's the manager, and I have Ken, who is the employee level role. So there's my field, and this is going to determine who is going to have access to what parts of the application based on that single field. And you can see that at the moment, all of the employees are active, meaning they can all log into the application. The next step is to set up the views. And in this use case, I have 6 different views. And the reason why is because I'm filtering based on who's going to have access to what information in my application. So I have a view that filters everyone. And this view basically says that I want to be able to show all of the employees who are active, because you might have a data page that they all need to share together. So admins, managers, and employees will have access to those same data pages. And if I click on edit, just to show you how this was built, again, you're going to give your view a name. You're going to include your staff table, and using the criteria tab, all I'm doing here is that status is checked. And if status is checked, then that means it's going to show me all of my employees. So let me hit finish here and show you my view. And you're going to be able to see that this view, it looks just like the table. It's showing everyone's information. Now my second example that I want to show you is, let's say that I have some data pages that only an admin level user role should be able to see. So I'm going to click edit here. And once again, you're going to give it a name, move your staff table, and then using the criteria tab, here's the way I've configured this logic here. So first I want the status to be checked, and I want the role field to equal to admin. So what this view is looking for is that the role field equals to admin and that it's an active admin, that the checkbox is checked. So this view is only going to show me John Doe. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's take a look at a few more. This view is only showing me active employees, which is set up very similar to our admin view. If I click edit here to show you, you're going to be able to see in the criteria tab, the only difference between this view and the admin view is that the role equals to employee from our table. Now let's take a look at a little bit more complex view here. Let's say, for example, you have some data pages that only the managers and admins should be able to see, but not the employees. So how do we set that up? Let's click on Edit. Again, staff table. Everything is driven based on that staff table. And then in my Criteria tab, you can see how this was configured. And what I've done here is I moved one OR element inside the main bracket. And what we're doing here is we want the role to equal to admin, or the role to equal to manager, and that the status is checked. So this is going to show me admins or managers who are active. So if we look at this view now, this view is going to show me John and also Sally. And then once you've set up all of your views on how you want to filter who's going to have access to what, you're then going to set up all of your authentications based on those views. And once you have your data pages built, then you can apply each one of these authentications to all of your data pages. One important thing that I want to point out here is when you go to data pages, I always like to have my folders created, because each folder is going to contain those specific data pages that need to be authenticated based on that specific authentication. Okay, so hopefully now you have a better understanding how to set up the foundation for this specific use case. Now let's take a look at something a little bit more complex in our third use case, where we add an additional field to our staff employee table and separate our employees based on a department, and also have user roles within each department. But before I show you that, again, let's take a look at an illustration first. That way you have a better grasp on what exactly we're going to be building in our third use case. The third use case deals with different departments inside an organization. So for example, you might have a sales department, and the sales employees can only see information pertaining to the sales department, whereas the support department can only see information pertaining to their application needs. So for example, the support team might have a ticket management application, whereas the sales team might have a CRM where they manage contacts and so on and so forth. And you might have an additional department, maybe for example marketing, and of course marketing will have their own dashboard, their own view. And within each department, we have many different user roles on who can access what parts of that application for that specific department. Let's go inside Caspio and let's take a look how we can configure this really quickly. Okay, so let's take a look at the third use case. We're going to go directly to my tables. And let's click on design mode of the staff table. And most of the fields are identical to the prior use case. The only difference here is, and this is an optional field, I added a field called title because I would like to be able to see my employees, who the CEO is, who the marketing managers are, directors of sales, etc. And now you're going to be able to see another field here at the bottom called department. So we're maintaining all of the same fields as before, with the addition of the title field and also department. So now when you look at my data sheet mode, you're going to be able to see the titles of each one of my employees, and then I'm adding this additional column for department, and then we have this role field. Now the super admin in this case is someone who has access to everything. So I'd like to have a separate role for that user because that's the CEO. The CEO should be able to maybe see additional data pages that no other employee would normally be able to see. And then you have the department field, and you can see very clearly here who belongs to the sales department, all of our sales employees. Then we have the marketing team, and also one employee in this case for the support team. Then what you want to do, just like before, is go down to views, and now you have to create your views on what you want to filter from this table. The most important thing is understanding in your application what group of employees are going to have access to what data pages, what reports, what forms. And based on that information, then you can set up all of your views. So for example, I have a view that lists all of the active sales employees. If I click on open, you're going to be able to see all of the active sales employees, because what we're doing is we're filtering based on department and also active status. Let me show you how this was configured. So once again, you move over to the staff table, and then you go to the criteria tab, and here you can see my setup. I'm using the AND operator, and we're looking that the status is checked, and now the only thing we care about is for department to equal to sales. And if both of these conditions are true, then this view is going to filter just the employees that belong to that sales department. Let's take a look at another setup here. Let's say you wanted to have a view that filters just sales admin only. So let's click on Edit. And again, we're going to go to the Criteria tab, and this is how you would normally set that up. So what we're looking at is the department equals to sales, and that the role equals to admin. So then from my table, we have 3 sales employees, but we only have 1 admin inside that sales department. So then in this case, when I click Finish and look at my view, I should be able to display just Sally Smith. And finally, one more view here. Let's take a look. Let's say, for example, you have some reports that need to be accessed by both the sales department and also the marketing team. Let me click Edit here so we can take a look how this was configured. And very similar setup to before. So what we're looking at here is department equal to sales, or department equals to marketing, and that all of the people inside both of those departments are active. And if this was done correctly, I should now be able to see 5 total users, 3 from the sales department and 2 from the marketing team. Once you have identified all of your views and you're filtering correctly on each one of the user groups, then you're going to jump down to authentications, and just like before, you want to build the authentication for each one of your views. Make sure you have the right naming convention set up. That way you know what that view is supposed to be for. So for example, this view is just for the sales admin, this view is for all of the sales employees, and this view is for either sales or marketing. Once you have the authentications built, well, now the last step is to apply those authentications to each one of your data pages. This concludes the 3rd use case. Let's jump into the very last use case. And before we take a look at that use case, let me show you an illustration like before so that you have a better understanding how this use case is configured. In the 4th and final example, let's take a look at something a little bit different. We're going to look at how companies can register on our website, and once a certain company logs in, this company will have the ability to add all of their staff employees that pertain to that company. So in this illustration that you're looking at, we're looking at company A that can add company A employees, and then we might have company B that comes to our website and is able to add company B employees. So let's go in Caspio and let's take a look and see how this is configured. Okay, so let's take a look at this last example. The idea again here is to have some way to allow companies to sign up on your website and be able to log into the application and add their own company employees. So let's take a look and see how we can create this foundation. The first thing we'll do is go to Tables. And initially what you want to do is set up 2 different tables. You want to have a table that collects your company information first, and then you're going to want to collect the information about the users from that specific company. Disregard this table for now. We'll come back to this table in a couple of minutes, but let me show you how to set up these 2 tables. For company info, what you want to collect initially is the company ID, and I have set this up as a GUID, which is a randomly generated ID. Then we have company name, website URL, and number of employees. Now you might have different fields of what you want to collect from these companies. These are the fields that I have for now. But of course you can expand upon this and add additional fields if need be. Once this form is filled out and you've generated this GUID number and you've collected all of this information, then in my second table, these are the fields that I'm going to need. I also have company ID, and I have this set as text 255 because what I'm trying to accomplish here is take that GUID company ID and feed it into this table so that we can link the company with the respective user that's signing up on our website. And you'll see in a few minutes how we actually make that connection. I also have user ID, GUID. So not only do we have the company ID, we also have some kind of a user ID because that user that signs up should have some kind of a unique ID. We have account status. You should by now know what this checkbox does. We also have date registered, role of the employee within that company. So you might have an admin level user, manager, or an employee. We also want to collect the name of the user that's signing up on our website, their title, their phone number, email, and password. Once you have these two tables configured, let me show you how you can now create the data pages and build them on top of these two tables. I have created this folder called Public Data Pages, and here are my two forms that are linking back to those two tables. We have part 1 of the registration and part 2. So part 1 is for companies to create an account. So let's take a look at the preview. And you can see this is built on top of our first table. So we create the company name, company website, and we can also say how many employees work at that company. Now let me show you and edit the data page so that you can see how that was created. So here's my submission form. And I'm linking that to my company info table. I give it a name. And then I'm going to include all of my fields in my initial submission form, or part 1 of the registration. And one also important thing here that you want to do is on exit pass the ID field as parameter. Make sure this checkbox is checked because we want to pass the company ID. That GUID number, we want to pass that now to our company users table so that we can stamp it. Here's my company name. That's a text field. We have the website URL, and for number of employees, I simply created a quick drop down that allows the user to select how many employees actually work at that company. So in my preview screen, you can see this drop down that allows the user to do that. And upon submission, we're now going to go to the second part of the registration process, and we're going to pass the company ID to that second form. Also, one important thing here to note is that you want to now link your second form by clicking on this Browse button and selecting that part 2 of the registration process. Or you can also have to go to a different URL. If you have embedded this into a website, you want to make sure that when you click Submit on this first form, you want the user to redirect it to the URL where the second form is deployed. In this case, I don't have it deployed, so we're just going to select the data page, part 2. Okay, so what this means now, when I fill out this form, and let's just say the company name is Google, company website is google.com, and of course we'll have maybe 100 plus employees, and once you hit submit, you're now going to that second form automatically. Let me show you the second form. Alright, so here's the second form. We're going to click Edit. Once again, you select the submission form, and this time you're going to select your company users table, not the company info, but the company users. And here are all the fields that I've moved over to my form. And let me show you now how to configure this second form. So for company ID, you want to make this field hidden. And you want to select external parameters, and then you're going to basically type out insert record company ID. So it's going to pass the company ID from the first form and insert that record inside the company ID field. You're not going to be able to see that because the field is going to be hidden. Account status, by default, this user that's signing up on my website, I want to automatically allow this person to log into the application, so I'm going to hide that field, and on load, go ahead and automatically check that box. For the role field, I want to now also hide this field and assign a default value admin, because this user from this company that's signing up on my website, we're going to assume that this is an admin level user because they're checking out our services. So we want to assign this user an admin level role. And finally, we have name, title, phone, email, which I changed the form element to email. and we have password to allow them to create their own password. Once you're done, you're simply going to hit finish here. And now you have your registration process completed. So when I fill out this second form as a user from Google, I will just say Ken Jones, title CEO, phone number, something like this. We'll say ken@google.com, and password can be, let's say, test123, test123. And once you hit submit, that information is going to be now stored inside two of our tables. So let's take a look. Let's look at our company info table. And there's this company ID that was automatically generated. Go ahead and remember this 62F3 as the last four digits. Company name was Google. That's the website URL, and this is how many employees work at this company. What we ended up doing is we passed this ID to our second form, or to our second table of users, and you're going to be able to see that 62F3. Here's the user ID. We have the account status is checked by default automatically. My role equals to admin. Here's the name of the user that works at Google, their title, phone number, email, and password. So what we've accomplished here is now we have this user from Google that signed up on our website. We have their company information, and we also have their user information, and also their role equals to admin. The reason why we want to have this company ID field passed to this table is when you're setting up record level security, you want to be able to filter data based on that company ID so that we can see information that belong only to that company, to that specific company. Okay? Once you have this set up, the next step, just like in all the other use cases, you now want to define your views on who's going to have access to what. And I only have one view created just to give you an example here. I have filter active admin. When I open up this view, it's only going to show me all of the active admins. And it's showing both of them. We have Ken Jones, and we also have John from Yahoo, which is what I used when I created this application. Once you have this done, let me quickly show you how this is created just to refresh your memory. So you select the company users table, not the company info table, but the company users table. And using the criteria tab, you're simply going to select the role field equal to admin and that the status is checked. Once you have that completed, go down to authentications. And I only have one authentication created called admin authentication. Set up the same way as before. Let me show you. Click on edit. You're going to select that view that filters out your active admins, and then you configure your email and password. And then once you have that set up, you can go to your DataPages. I have a folder created called admin access because this folder should only contain data pages that can be accessed by the admin. And I have created this form called add new employee. Let me preview this. And let's go ahead and log out because I'm still logged in as the Yahoo user. Let's log in as ken@google.com. And once Ken logs in, he has the ability now to add additional users for that specific company. So I can check to allow this employee to log in, and I only want to assign this user maybe employee level access. Okay, and when you do that, let's go ahead and complete this form now. We're going to say Walter Thornton, title admin, or title, let's just say sales exec. Phone number, we'll say email, walter@google.com. Password can be test1, test1. Once you hit submit, let's see what happens in my table now of all of the company users. You can see that this new employee was added to this table. Walter Thornton, he has employee level role, but he also belongs to the same company because I'm stamping the company ID inside that form. Let me show you how that's built. So let's go back to DataPages and let's go ahead and edit that form where we add the employee. Here's my submission form. It's based on the company users table because that's where all the user information is stored. and I'm using the admin authentication because only the admin level user should be able to add employees, include all of your fields to your form, and here's the company ID field. When you have this company ID field, what you're going to do is make this field hidden, and you're going to grab the authentication value, company ID, from that company users table. Because now we have that company ID inside the users table, we can grab that information and automatically stamp it upon submission of that form. Account status, we have a checkbox here to allow or not allow employees to log in. And now here is my role field. As an admin user, I created a drop down here, and I'm looking up a table of all the roles that I have in that table. So if I open up that table that I created, my third table, here it is. I only have one field, but this table contains all the roles for the organization that they can select. And all I'm doing in my data page is creating a drop down. I used a source called both because my custom value is going to say select, and my lookup table is going to link to that roles lookup table to allow me to select those roles from the drop down. And finally, we have name, title, phone, email, and password. We're going to hit finish. And this allows the admin level user now to be able to add an employee. Let's add one more here. We'll allow employee login. We'll select manager role, and we'll say sales. Well, let's just say Carrie Smith, sales manager. Again, we'll add the phone number. This field is not required, but we'll add it anyway. Carrie@google.com, password test, and let's hit submit. So now in my table of all the company users, you'll see that this company, Google, now has 3 employees, 1 admin, 1 employee, 1 manager, and now you can set up your views to filter out on these different roles. Who's going to have access to what data pages? Okay, and let me show you one more data page here that I've created for the admin level. Not only can an admin add an employee, an admin also has the ability to manage employees. So when I hit preview, it's showing me all the employees that belong to that company. Okay, so as a Google admin, I'm only seeing employees that belong to this specific company. Let me show you how to set record level security on a data page like this one here. So we're going to edit the report. I have a tabular format selected. I'm using an admin authentication. And the most important thing here is this checkbox for record level security. Once you enable this checkbox, the authentication field or value is company ID. That's what we're looking at to filter information based on the company ID. And the matching field in the current data source, and the current data source is our company users table that contains the company ID. You want to select company ID from this dropdown. And once these two fields match, now when the admin level user logs in, they're only going to be able to see employees belonging to that specific company ID. Well, this concludes our last use case. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to subscribe for our YouTube channel for any of the latest tips and tricks how to use Caspio. And again, thank you for your time today. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us at any time. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great day. Bye-bye.